live from the Heartland show. We're here for you with another good show. We've got Katie's with me and Tom's with me, and we've got Koya Paz from the DePaul Theater Department as well as the Free Street Theater. And we're going to talk to you about a number of issues. We want to remind you that we are now on CAN TV. You can look that up, the time, and you can get us anytime at youtube.com/Heartland Media, as well as we're broadcasting our regular slot at WLUW on Saturday mornings, 9 a.m. It is a week late when you hear it then, but it's worth listening to. So we usually like to start off with something good happening to all of us. So let's go around the room. Let's start with Tom. What do you got to say for yourself, brother?
Well, we are all recovering from...
I'm going to start today. Let me start.
Go ahead, Katie.
Katie's starting.
Yeah, because as I've said in other times on this what's the good news thing, it's often hard for me to find the good news these days. I don't have cute little grandchildren to look at and scamper around with the ducks and yada yada. But this week was pretty terrible, starting Monday morning with the news that most of us woke up to. And I was in such bad shape, Tom had to give me bourbon before noon. And I was so unglued, I really wasn't sure quite, how to deal with it. But then I found out the way to deal with it is have a tornado hit your neighborhood. It snapped me right out of my funk, put my 2 feet flat on the ground again, and, scurrying into my house before anything blew into the window and broke it. But that's how my good thing happened this week, through a tornado hitting Rogers Park. What about you, Tom?
Well, it took our grandson to get our 8-year-old grandson to talk to the 3 adults to say, you're not taking this seriously. We need to go to the basement, which we did when we had a brief power outage. We were in South Rogers Park, and so we just had the high wind and the drop in pressure and the green sky and all sorts of branches and twigs. But our neighbors really took a hit, along with St. Scholastica and Rogers Park itself, that's in West Ridge to the west of us. It was remarkable because we don't get tornadoes by the lakefront, we thought. But, with everything else with global warming, we have bigger storms. And God bless the grandson for getting us in the basement for the first time in 30 years living in Rogers Park. Michael, how did you survive the storm?
Well, I got to say, I was at the YMCA lifting weights when all of a sudden they came around right at the end of my workout, and which is a 45-minute slot you make a reservation for. And they said, everybody has to go downstairs. And they took us down through the swimming pools into the men's locker room, where I noticed 2 guys by a little tiny vent kind of window with their phones so they could get the word out. So I went to that spot and said where I was, and about 15 minutes later they came and said we could leave. I drove back. I drove by Jarvis and Ashland, and I saw all the trucks and the trees down. Things were pretty intense. On the other hand, one of the best things that happened to me this week was my son Hal, who has a new girlfriend, and they went to a suburb to visit her relatives, and he took up bike riding. She got him on a bicycle. He came back home, and he didn't get on the bike that I bought him a few years ago. He borrowed my old Russ, beautiful bike, and he's just been blissed out riding bikes all over northern Chicago and into Evanston. So I see that as a real good thing. It made me very happy.
We weren't the only ones hit by this series of storms. I've been trying to catch up with the actual damage on the ground in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, for example. There are pictures of grain silos smashed and crumpled against each other, and they are still without power. One of the things about the density of a big city, and maybe the deals made with Con Ed and some Politico downstate, is we get service back quickly. And the people out in rural areas are really suffering more than we have any idea about with the combined problems that we're facing right now.
Koya Paz, were you affected at all by the storm as it came through the north side of Chicago?
No, I'm in Humboldt Park, so we definitely had strong winds, but my patio furniture didn't even blow away. I was hoping my internet would go out because I had 8 hours straight of Zoom meetings, but alas, I was able to complete all of them. I'm so grateful, all safe and happy.
Well, there was a great sense of camaraderie and helping out, even with great response by the city, at least in Rogers Park, to all these downed trees and blocked streets. It was remarkable that no one got hurt through all of this, other than a lot of lost trees and a very changed landscape. Although I see that as another opportunity in the midst of this pandemic. Katie, what do you think about our orchards coming back and the parkways that got ruined by this tornado?
You're asking me one of those questions you ask me, and I have no idea what you're after. I think you want orchards, and I think that's a great thing to go for, Tom. I don't know about our orchards previously. I don't know about that time. I just remember that we were told there was a birch forest at the end of my block in the olden days. But hey, let's plant some peach trees.
There
Heck
you go.
yeah.
Apple trees.
So, Michael, can I ask you, how's your mail delivery going recently?
You know, my mailman is a White Sox fan. We have a real good relationship. You know.
This, folks, tells you a lot about Michael. He knows that his mailman is a White Sox fan. He probably also knows how he votes, because Michael talks
Also,
about it.
I had a great job. I think I've mentioned it before, a rural route in Connecticut during Christmas time in the early 60s, working for the post office. And I do have great love for the post office. You know, I've been following this post office scene with a lot of trepidation and concern about it. My wife came down the other day and she kept saying, "What are we going to do about this? What can we do?" And on the TV comes Joe Neguse. He's a congressman from 2nd District in Colorado, and he has gotten together a petition with about 85 people, you know, challenging this whole slowdown in the post office, initiated by Trump's appointee and the change of that board. I also, you know, have been following it pretty closely and read just recently that they're not going to remove the blue boxes, supposedly, like they started to. And there are some people speculating that the Democrats may benefit a little bit from this move. Who decided on this move in the guy's administration that affects seniors, affects rural people, and affects veterans, as well as military personnel. So my mail continues to come. I don't have that much mail coming in that of like, you know, priority mail or something, or a check for a book I sold. I just take what I get, and usually the mail is for the kids and not for me.
All I know is the most shared quote on Facebook right now is Trump is doing more to stop you from voting than he is to stop you from getting COVID. Just, you know, get that.
And all I have to say to the whole thing is another impeachable offense. Lock them up.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to point out, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking with our Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, and hopefully she'll give us some real insights into what's going on around that.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, we've had a very exciting week on the political front in terms of some history being made. Katie, what do you think about our new VP choice?
We have a ticket. We can go forward now and work for it. I think Kamala Harris, you know, neither of the two people on this ticket were my personal first choices. But I, unlike others, I'm pulling up my big girl pants and getting down and making sure that people are registered. And I don't want to hear anything else about, you know, where somebody was born and all that other crap. You know, we have a ticket. We're voting against Trump, if you want to put it that way. I don't care. I'm glad that they've got Kamala, because every time Joe opens his mouth, he puts his foot in it. So
I find her more and more impressive, and like I told a number of people, we like her now that we've got her. We like her big time.
Is that what you've told other people?
I have. People ask me, they said, "What do you think of the choice?" I say, now that we got her, I like her.
You You know, there have been very few perfect presidential candidates, and I'd like you to name even Hillary's running mate, although, Katie, you could probably do it. But I bet most people who voted for her last time would have trouble naming her running mate. But my point is, I'm pretty excited about the future prospects of having this kind of template cast. And I think that's what's important, because whoever the personality is never going to be perfect. It's our organizing that will move them where we want them to be. You know, we got Barack elected and we kind of sat back a bit and he became a neoliberal on us. So maybe we can move.
He was always a centrist. He was always a centrist.
Right.
You know, but you're right. What left of center folks are not accustomed to is following up their vote, if they actually do vote, with
action.
making someone holding people's feet to the fire. But yeah, I don't know if we're going to see anything of the convention, but I did like the format where right after he named her, Biden and Kamala and Harris, I got to stop doing that. Biden and Harris are sitting across from each other on a table with two screens behind them, taking questions and dealing with actual issues with actual American citizens. It's a great format, and if they do that, nothing but that until election time, it's fine with me. Don't waste money on, you know, rallies that can't happen and other things that shouldn't happen. Just talk to the people about what your intentions are. I think it's fine. I am most concerned that everybody get the choice to vote. So that's what I'm going to be concentrating on, making sure.
So the other big picture of the week, besides the tornado, was a city still divided, bridges up. And that's really the reason we brought on our guest today to join us, if that's time for us to get to talking to Koya a little bit. She could be chomping at the bit to react to the ticket. Feel free to throw in your comments on that, Koya.
Yeah, throw in what you want, Koya, about that.
But I think some of us saw the bridges as kind of a metaphor for a city that needs more bridge building rather than bridges separated. And it's, you know, a tough time that we're working through. And Koya had some pretty provocative comments, thoughtful comments on Facebook that are really what led us to wanting to talk about this a little bit deeper. Michael, do you want to talk about how you reacted when you saw this piece that you then share with the rest of us?
Well, I'll let you know that Koya is my daughter, so whenever I read something by her, I'm always really proud of her. And she started off talking about a coffee machine that she had broken, and as I recall, and then it suddenly turned into talking about what it had got when we all suddenly on Monday morning found out that there had been a lot of looting downtown. A couple hundred people wreaked havoc, apparently. And the first thing I read about it following it was Koya's piece. And I know Katie talked to Koya at length a little bit yesterday about it. Why don't you two do some discussion here? Koya, Katie, you're muted. You're muted.
Right. Not anymore. Not anymore. I think both of us saw Koya's comment and at the same time early, you know, and I had already gone down a really awful dark tunnel off of seeing the news and knowing the kind of commentary that was going to come up. And I think, Koya, you spoke to that. You know, you woke up to the news of more writing. I've got your piece in front of me here. But don't we think, and that you say, and that a lot of people are saying, but this isn't the way to do things. But don't we think people in this city have a reason to be angry, was the question you asked. So I'll just leave that there, and I could pull out some other quotes, but why don't we go to the source here, Koya? And how did you feel when you posted that? Did you feel like you had actually expressed exactly, you know, the thing that you wanted to express, and how people reacted to that?
I think, like, you know, one of the things that happens all of the time, you know, Katie, you just talked about it a little bit, is this notion that there are appropriate ways to behave. in the face of repression, or appropriate ways to behave in the face of being kind of brutalized and oppressed. And these are coming from people who are largely not the targets of the systems that people are protesting and that people are being oppressed by. And at the same time, I was thinking about how all of us, I don't think there's a single person who hasn't in their individual and personal life reached some kind of snapping point. And so that was why I started, with the example of the coffee maker, because I was having an argument with my partner while trying to prep coffee, and I almost broke the coffee maker because I was so mad. I was just kind of like, well, you don't, blah, 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 and I loved my coffee maker. And so this was, I would have been very sad to be without it. And I know that sounds really trivial, but I think that this is, a key piece of political understanding is empathy. We really have to understand and see in ourselves the struggle of other people. Not that we make other people's struggles our own, but that I think my first spot, especially when I don't agree with something, it's so easy to be intellectual, but I actually try also to have an emotional and empathetic response. Because to me, political change happens a lot at the emotional level. You have to change people's feelings as much as you have to change their thinking. I think all of us, the example I give a lot is that I'm not a very good environmentalist. Kind of in my head, I understand that climate change is a problem. In my everyday practice, I still buy prepackaged food, and I still buy fast fashion, and I still do all these things that are terrible for the environment. And, for me, it's because there isn't an emotion, my emotional desire to consume is superseding my intellectual desire to be better for the planet. I always try to give myself, I don't try to put myself too high on a pedestal. People are complicated and we make poor choices all of the time. I think in the case of what's happening in Chicago, we're in a moment of reckoning that I think people don't even need to take a long view on. If you think about the more recent closing of schools, the more recent closing of mental health clinics, the closing of urgent care centers, I'm talking about in the last 10 years, we saw all of this under Rahm. During the budget stalemate with Ronner, we lost so many low-wage jobs at community and social service organizations that never came back. So this is not, we don't even have to go back to redlining and to the systems that set up Chicago to be so hyper-segregated to see that we've seen an increased divestment in the south and west sides of the city. And the only place that we're increasing our resources is in policing, right? And there have been some really persuasive numbers going around, $33 million to put officers in schools and $95 million to build a new cop academy, right? A new training facility for police officers. This is separate from the regular budget where policing is about 40% of our city's budget, not including misconduct payouts. So you start to think about that money, and then you start to think about communities where there haven't been investments, right? We're not working on jobs programs. We're in fact closing schools. We're closing access to community services. We're not reinvesting after those organizations lost money. And so, and then we're in the middle of a pandemic. People are incredibly stressed out and it's hot. And I don't think that we should discount the temperature, especially because the city hasn't effectively opened cooling centers because of the pandemic. The beachfront is closed. The public pools are closed. You're seeing hyper policing of the south and west side now, increase on the increase. So people aren't even able to open fire hydrants the way they might in a normal city because the cops are coming down on them faster. And so I think people are just feeling like nobody is here to take care of me. We have to show up for ourselves. And sorry, I don't really care about the Old Navy. And I want to say that I think that this can be a really difficult, it sounds like I'm endorsing rioting or looting, but what I'm saying is it doesn't matter whether we endorse it or not. We need to understand the roots of it. And if you are angrier at, the Apple Store or Old Navy being broken into than you are over the past decade of divestment on the south and west side, then you're never going to understand what's happening in our city, and you're never going to be able to be a change maker to move our city forward.
Wow, Koya.
So well
Thank
said,
you.
Koya. So well said.
That's a Facebook post that just went to an op-ed that some newspaper ought to be publishing in town.
Did you
Wow.
by chance, Koya, see the Reader article this week saying this is not a war zone? The title of the article was "This is not a war zone," and it was coverage of what happened in Englewood for 3 hours after that still inadequately reported on shooting as we sit here. And it had everything to do with what happened, 10 hours later in the middle of the night.
And
Yeah.
and if I could add to that incident, the overnight looting, about 48 people have been indicted off of that incident. None of them are from Englewood. They are
Right.
college students so far.
So far.
But
I
that
think
initial
that was
story,
such-
the initial story we heard was that after this questionable shooting, there was a cavalcade that came downtown. Well, I got to tell you about this broken bridges up city trying to get home from the west side on Thursday night. I ended up being blocked on Congress. This is before 9 o'clock. This is like 8:20 in the evening. Blocked again at Lakeshore Drive. So they're worried about some folks coming from the south side downtown. They were sending us all to the south side, out of downtown.
It's
It
just
was-
that I think
was-
a lot of people from Chicago don't feel like downtown is for them. And the optics on this increases that, we're literally going to make it impossible to come in or out. I do think that there was such a coordinated social media effort that it's hard not to believe that pieces of that were pre-planned by someone. And I don't think it's useful for me to go down a kind of conspiracy theory, like who did it? Is it Black Ops? Is it right wing? Is it, like a racial justice organization? To me, no matter what, we have a really painful problem in our city. And I do think it's important for us to realize that like so many beautiful and joyful and community affirming things are happening on the south and west side of the city. They're happening almost exclusively without the support of a government that we pay taxes to. It is neighbors helping neighbors. It is community organizations who don't get their funding from the government showing up for each other. I kept myself out of despair on Monday because my first meeting was with Alt Chicago, which is an organization of artists and organizers who are building food pantries all over the south and west side. And they kind of have turnips, like come celebrate, let's make things together. They collaborate with Tanika Johnson of the Folded Map Project. There's so many people who are doing beautiful things. The Front Porch Art Center, trying to document all of the beautiful things happening on the west side of the city. So people are working hard. And so I also want to challenge an idea that there's like there be dragons kind of way that we treat the south and west side sometimes in the city when we're speaking from the north side or from a middle class perspective or a white perspective. Because the reality is that people are working so hard every day to make their communities a better place. But where anyone who has any kind of political or social privilege needs to absolutely keep the pressure on our local and state government first to redistribute resources. And sometimes that does mean like fewer beautiful orchards for us on the north side, because the money we would take for that we're going to invest in creating more greenery on the south and west side, right? We see, like you look at maps of greenery in a city and we always see more trees and more public plants in the wealthier parts of a city than we do in the poorer ones. But if you think about what shade can do, even to kind of cool down houses and cool down blocks, just think like our city. And already the response of our mayor to sort of immediately, like in front, who is her optics person? Like she's in front of all these yachts announcing all the ways that they're going to, protect against rioters. I can only think that she is trying to appeal to developers and wealthy and people. And so to me, again, where is the imagination and the quick deployment of resources when we're talking about emergencies? Like, parts of the South Side have rates of COVID at 14.4%, 8.8%. When we think about like the kind of like systemic violence being enacted on the South and West Side, like we have to absolutely demand that the city invest creatively and quickly on the south and west side of the city. That's the way that we're going to recalibrate after all of this. And yes, that will involve pulling resources from many other pockets, including the police, but also, you know, public works on the northeast side of the
Oh
city.
yeah, I love that you brought up that the optics and who might our mayor be speaking to, because it begs the question of, so if Michigan Avenue gets attacked, let me do that in quotes, attacked, all these wealthy investors are going to run somewhere else. And I'm here to say, no, they're not. Chicago is location, location, location. It will never not be. And now is the time for us to say, this is our city, not your city. It's our city. And we will make it the way we want after this COVID. And your post was so eloquent in saying exactly that. It was, you know, you were saying, you said, we have to decide no person or community is disposable. We have to be willing to go hard to build up neighborhoods and communities that, so that informal economy isn't the only economy. Yes, yes. I mean, we need, and a couple of years ago or so when we had that burst, they now have, you know, 7 different names for all these weather happenings that have developed thanks to climate change. But we lost like 96 trees in Rogers Park when that happened. And we talked about it on the show here about what trees do for a community and what not having them, exactly what you just referred to. I mean, from the simplest to the most sublime, from shade to just having those leaves right outside my window, waving in the wind and giving me just really good vibes. So yeah, and the other thing about that is that police acting because they were in fear for their lives is another line I'm so tired of hearing.
Yep.
Let's stop being afraid of all this stuff, shall we? Let's start talking about what we need and what all of us need and how it is that there's enough for everyone in this country if we just start assuming and acting like there is. And, you know, the movement to get the police out of schools, which is really gaining great energy and having some wind behind it at this point, is another way for us to reinvest differently, you know, and to stop paying for cops' misbehavior would be a really great input of funds in for better things in our city.
I think even, you know, like I'm sort of unabashedly for defunding the police and working to the abolition of policing and prisons. Like that is my life dream. I don't know that I'll see it in my lifetime, but I think we have to aim high in our organizing and then everything else is a compromise. But I think, you know, I have one friend, only one friend who is a police officer. No surprise. I don't think many, I don't intersect a lot. Although even with the police, I take a very human approach, you know, like I understand that these are people. And actually, I think a lot of police right now don't feel like the mayor has their back, you know, that you're hearing over and over again that police have had all of their days off canceled. They're working 12-hour days. We've almost blown through the overtime budget. And I don't think that bodes well, that you have all of these officers out on the street. I don't think they should be wearing head-to-toe riot gear, but they are. It's 90 degrees outside. They haven't rested. They haven't had a day off. They are stressed too. We are just putting a match to this. Like we're not considering the human conditions of any of this. And, you know, but one of the things that I hear police saying is like, you know, we are the first line of response, you know, like we do so much more than policing. We do, you know, CPR, we do crisis de-escalation, we do, you know, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, why? Why do we depend on our police to do that? People who also have a gun and who are empowered to like shoot to kill, right, are the people we're sending to de-escalate a mental health crisis. That doesn't make sense, you know? So even if you think that there should be police for some things, surely as a community, we can agree that our city would be better served by investing in, you know, crisis units that can go out to help de-escalate, right? If a child is not being fed, do we take them away from DCFS or do we drop off food and bring a counselor right over? And, you know, like there's so many patterns that are a pathway to prison that, again, take people out of their communities, make it harder for people to make money in their communities. It's really like, and another thing I think about all the time in this moment is that we've seen a proliferation of mutual aid, right? Neighbors helping neighbors, you know, here I have extra food, let's go do this. We're already practicing the city we could have. But at the same time, I think about our extraordinarily high rate of taxes in Chicago. And I'm not an anti-taxer. I'm all for my taxes being used well. But a couple years ago, I got very curious about the TIF funds in my neighborhood, Humboldt Park. Almost all of them go to support a church that doesn't have any visible economy surrounding it, right? And so I find that incredibly frustrating, that this even when money isn't being kind of evacuated from communities, like we saw with Lincoln Yards, is getting so many TIF funds, right? It's the third wealthiest neighborhood in Chicago, getting, you know, millions and millions of dollars of investment from our taxes. We as citizens have a right to demand a redistribution of those city resources. DK, I'm an artist, so I love the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events. I love the Park District. I think there's many city agencies doing beautiful work in the city. But DK's exclusive funding comes from a hotel tax, right? So this is, you know, we get into this terrible cycle where if we're not appeasing tourists, then we're not able to fund arts and culture in our city. But what does that say about who we think arts and culture are for? You know, it's so, I think like we could, with a really radical sense of imagination, change the way our city works. And instead, what we're seeing our mayor do is dig in deeper and deeper and deeper into the things that are not working. That's what's really upsetting to me.
Koya, before we let you go, we, as adjunct professor at DePaul, you have to go all online, as I did this past spring suddenly with 2 weeks notice at UIC. You want to talk a little bit about what it's like to do theater online? Can you?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Anything is possible, right? Like, I think artists have to be in the business of imagination first and creativity first. You know, for us, so I teach full-time theater at DePaul. And then I'm also the artistic director of a theater company, Free Street Theater. You know, so much of what differentiates theater from film and television is making the audience's presence matter. And I think that is a challenge in the digital sphere, right? So that we're still finding ways to interact, make the performance change based on who shows up or what somebody says in the chat. And the thing I tell my colleagues and my students is like, it's still really new. We went online March 12th. You know, I've rehearsed shows for less time than that, much less reinvent a whole way of like teaching and being together. So I think we all just have to bring a spirit of compassion and creativity to our work. I do think that there's a lot you can do online better than you can do live. You know, I find that the chat function, for example, lets my more introverted students pop in a thing they want to say, even when the talkers are taking over, right? Breakout rooms let people have intimate conversations. You can sort of keep track of, you know, who's speaking and who's not. You know, I think that there are ways, there's a million apps. My 11-year-old is teaching me so much about how to interact with other humans off of Zoom, but still digitally. But I hold out a lot of hope that we will be finding ways to be remote, socially distanced, and still live. At Free Street, we've always tried to reach the people that didn't know they were going to see a play. We've performed outdoors every summer for 50 years. This is our 51st summer, and we didn't do that because we couldn't figure out how to keep our performers safe while we rehearsed. So instead, we did a pop-up pantry in back of the yards, and that is our outdoor work. You know, surprise, here's a bag of food. You know, that's probably more helpful to people than a play right now. Though I do think the arts keep our spirits up, and we definitely need that.
Michael, Katie, parting shot here with Koya?
It's Michael's turn if he's got something.
I just, I love hearing you talk. You, it's like I got a good lesson, and things I say I got to pay more attention to. You did good, Koya.
Hey,
Well,
Koya.
you did good too. It's a great to like come up in a family that has prioritized social justice from the beginning.
So yeah, and if you want to stick around, we're gonna just do a couple more things locally, very locally here in Rogers Park, as a lot of neighbors know, Sheridan Road is home to many different congregate housing institutions. Used to only be called senior housing, but for a long, long time now, senior housing has been a place where people who had no other alternatives wind up. And to a significant degree, that involves returning vets, homeless vets, disabled people who are able in every other way and only need some assistance in their home, not a nursing facility, are stuck in these facilities, which are privately owned and for whom each person is a money stream, if you will. But in the local units for this period of time under COVID, we have, and these are old figures as I say them, we've had 700 positive cases and 100 deaths from 6 institutions that run between Howard Street and Touhy Avenue and a couple down the side streets, Birchwood. There's going to be a march called an Institutional Rescue and Recovery March, Sunday, August 30th from 2 to 5 p.m. that walks from Howard to Touhy on Sheridan Road, walk, bike, car caravan in support of residents and hoping to put pressure on the state to start moving people out and de-densifying. I mean, the woman we talked to on our show a couple weeks ago explained this to us, and she is a person who does not need any nursing care, and yet she's stuck in there and she's got a roommate and she's got to use a bathroom that many other people use. How terrifying must that be? So we'll report on that when it happens, but just since this will be on the air before that, we invite all of our neighbors to support those residents in our neighborhood who are so often dismissed or forgotten.
Some of you who might go to the Evanston Farmers Market instead of our Glenwood Sunday Market have seen Henry's Farm. And Henry's Farm is the focus of a documentary that, because we can't do film festivals, has been postponed being shown, except you can see it this month at the Cisco Center. In fact, if you have a few extra bucks, you can't maybe go to a movie theater, but you can go online and get the vast wealth of the curated offerings at Cisco Center. I think it's worth the $9 that it cost us to see a wonderful Cuban film last week. Our dear neighbor, Nez Summers, has Seasons of Change on Henry's Farm. It's now available throughout the Midwest. You can view it through Cisco Center through August. There are many, many other films there. Take advantage of it in these crazy times when we still need to find culture and entertainment around us.
And we want to remind all of our viewers and listeners that the U.S. Census is going on. The current administration has attempted to shorten the collection of information by a month. As most of you know, the census is real important because the numbers determine the kind of moolah that goes to various parts of the country. And we're looking to get the last 60 million people counted. So spread the word to do the census. If you haven't done it, fill it out. Go online. It's easy. It's important.
And we want to tell everybody about the fair tax. It's the first thing on the ballot. It's a constitutional amendment. Please vote yes on the fair tax.
On the sports front, basically Major League Baseball continues to struggle. The Cubs they were in first place. They won, I think they lost last night. The Sox are going to play the Cardinals. Supposedly the Cardinals have had a hard time with the virus. Meanwhile, over in the basketball world, in the NBA, I don't think they've had anyone come down with the virus. It's a tight setup. For those who have followed Coach Greg Popovich for many years, you know that the Spurs have been in the playoffs for 22 years in a row. Not so this time, but Popovich continues to speak up and be an inspirational coach. While he doesn't kneel, he's real supportive of Black Lives Matters, real anti the you-know-who in the White House. And we will keep you posted on sports. One thing to note is most football has been canceled, but the Southern SEC, apparently because of the money, because of their politics, whatever, is still trying to go ahead with football. And on the Illinois high school front, there will be cross country. So running at a social distance seems to be okay.
You know what, Michael? I don't think anybody knows what moolah is anymore.
It's money, moolah, money, cash, dough.
All right. So,
Memoriam, Joe Siegel of the Jazz Showcase died and he's in his 90s. He kept the jazz community together for many years. After the Jazz Festival each year, he would have sets over at the Jazz Showcase. I don't know who will fill that gap, but it's really too bad.
Yeah.
And with that said, we want to remind you that you can get us now on CAN TV. You can get us on youtube.com/Heartland Media. And we're back in our regular slot on Saturday mornings, a week delayed. And we want to thank everyone who makes the show possible. That would include the three of us you've been seeing and listening to, as well as Lynn Orman-Weiss and and James Porter. And we encourage you.
and Susan Clark.
Oh, the most important of all.
And as we go out today, we want to play some music from the Glenwood Arts Festival from a few years back. The Urban Rhythm Band is going to be performing, as we're recording here, as the Urban Arts Festival tries a mobile concert this year. And we hope everyone enjoyed the good weather, and our hats are off to them. So, Michael, what is it we do?
encourage you to do good in the world.
Because the world needs all the good we do.
All power to the people.
Right on. Thank you, Koya.
Thank you, Koya.